Greetings. In this video, I want to talk about some things which our right honorable friend, the good doctor over at the We Woke Now channel, Dr. Kelly Richardson, some things which he has said about Lemba and DNA. And the theme here is going to pertain to questions of consistency and clarity. Now, I'm going to show a clip from a video from 1.5 years ago, and then I'm going to show a few clips from a video which aired just this past Friday. As we look at the excerpts from each video, we can briefly examine our friends' perception of the Lemba and their relevance to debates in America about who today may or may not be an Israelite. So let's jump right in, and let's begin with the older of the clips. Like I said, this is from a little over 1.5 years ago, specifically from October of 2020, and I'll post a link in the video description. All the sources used in this video will be linked to in the video description. Now, in this clip, Dr. Richardson is himself going to play a clip, so it might be said we're going 2 layers deep, watching a clip within a clip, a meta clip, if you will. Now, but whatever the case, as you watch this clip, pay attention to how when the good doctor comments on what he showed, he attaches himself, and presumably a much larger, though perhaps not clearly defined group, to the Lemba, right? Keep that in mind. So we're going to pick up at slightly past 34 minutes into the video, and this clip is going to run just under 2 minutes. Let's watch this, and then I'll offer some comments. Here we go.
Let me let you hear something again about the Lemba.
Eventually, DNA testing advanced to the point where the Lemba's claims could be put to the scientific test. University of London scholar Dr. Tudor Parfit swabbed a cross-section of Lemba tribe members, and the results were astounding. The Y chromosome, passed on by many males in the population, proved to contain the Kohen modal haplotype. Among Jews, the CMH marker is most prevalent among Kohanim, or hereditary priests. In addition, this marker is one that only emanates from the Middle East. It is not found in any identifiable African roots. Even more astounding are the following stats. The CMH marker shows up in 50% of the Lemba tested. The same marker shows up only 3 to 5% of the time in the general Jewish population.
So I wanted to let you hear how they are saying that this module that they came up with, right, that's supposed to be in 3.5% of the general Jewish population, but yet within the Lembas, they said at least 50%. We got a problem here. Right? What does that mean? we got a problem here, not with us, because guess what? We know that we are the original people. They know that we are the original people.
So, did you catch that? Did Dr. Kelly not unwittingly make the Kohen modal haplotype the standard for Israelite identity, right? Think about it. If over 90% of mainstream Jews not having the Kohen modal haplotype is a problem for that group, wouldn't that beg some follow-up questions? Like, for example, does the good doctor have the Kohen modal haplotype? And if not, is that a problem for him? Or what percentage of the population, which the good doctor considers to be Israelite, what percentage of that population has the Kohen modal haplotype? Honestly, I'd be willing to wager that it might likewise be quite low. Now, Dr. Richardson had his GEDmatch oracle results on the screen, so perhaps someone might want to declare that he himself got lined up with the Lemba in a genetic test. But it should be clear that just because you got Lemba in a GEDmatch oracle result, and note the emphasis on oracle, as that's a subject I'll likely discuss in a future video, but for now, just because you got Lemba in a GEDmatch oracle result, that doesn't mean you have the Kohen modal haplotype, right? That should be obvious. Even a number of actual Lemba don't have the Kohen modal haplotype. So this begs the question, is the Kohen modal haplotype part of the standard for Israelite identity? And if so, what might the implications of such a stance be? However, if one wishes to take the position that the Kohen modal haplotype is not relevant to questions of Israelite lineage, then there wouldn't seem to be much point in invoking, mainstream Jewish interest in the Lemba, which itself centered largely on the Kohen modal haplotype. Right? A while back, we saw a similar lack of clarity regarding this issue from others in the Good Doctor's orbit, namely, for example, the twins over at Teo Ministries. They went as far as casting aspersions on the relevance of the Kohen modal haplotype, only to then turn around and declare that even mainstream Jews consider the Lemba to be Israelites, right? And as was shown on Faithful to God's channel a while back, the Teo twins would exhibit that sort of disconnect within the same single discussion, within the same single show. But whatever the case, getting back to our good friend, Dr. Kelly Richardson, like I said, that clip was from a year and a half ago. So maybe the Good Doctor's understanding of the subject has evolved since then. So let's jump to the next video. Now, this is, as I said, was a video from last Friday. And I'm going to show a few clips from this video. First, I want to show Dr. Richardson making a vague allusion to Lemba percentages of something being contrasted with mainstream Jews having a lower percentage of that something, whatever that unknown thing is. And, the Good Doctor actually tried to make the same point twice at different points at different times in his 3+ hour show. So I'm going to play two different clips in succession here, one from slightly after the 38-minute mark and the other one from slightly after the 2-hour, 10-minute mark. And you'll see the timestamps at the start of each clip. The combined footage here will run for about 3 minutes. Here, listen to this.
Kohen Hamandishe, elder from the Lembas, right? He was brought to our attention some of the DNA stuff that they had to deal with, challenges when they got DNA tested by the Jewish community as we know them. So he expressed that how they came up with a test, they tested them, right? Now he said on the average, even the person that was testing them, that is a Jew, that person's DNA test came back 1.4, 1.5, something like that, saying that they're Jewish. And I'm going to give you a source here, how those numbers fall right in line with the source I'm going to share. But then when they got tested initially with that same test, it stated that they were 25%. 25%. Now, the average Jewish person, per se, as we know them, their test is normally 1.25%, as he shared. And I have a document I'm going to share with you guys that confirms this, right? So then they took the test, then they took the results with them, then came back and tested them again, over 200 of them, including Kohen Hamandishe, tested them again. And I believe they were trying to make adjustments to the test. So what happened? Their results went from 25% to 48%. So then they took the test, decided to test them again, and their results went from 48% to almost 75%, confirming that they are connected with the ancient people of the book. And that was the last time they heard from them, right? They haven't gotten the final results back. Right, family? Look at what we see here. This confirms what Kohen Hamandishe said. Because he said the people that was testing them at the max was 1.5% in their DNA. And when the Lembas, when they got tested, initially the test was 25%. Then they tested them again after making whatever adjustments, and it went from 25% to 48%. Tested them again, went from 48% to 74, 75%. And then they haven't heard from them since.
So is it just me, or was that incredibly vague, right? The Lemba have some percentage of something Jewish, while mainstream Jews had a significantly lower percentage of whatever it was that the Good Doctor never got around to articulating. Now, honestly, and with all due respect, I don't really expect the Good Doctor to meaningfully engage this topic. But I bet if he was pressed for clarity, he might just try to pass it off to something Kohen Hamandishe said back in November of 2020. But with all due respect, if that was the course of action he took, that's not how serious discussions on genetics should be handled, right? Now, to be clear, I'm not intending this in any sort of sharp way towards specifically Kohen Hamandishe here. Rather, I'm referring to specifically Dr. Kelly Richardson. Surely a man who has gone so far through the rigors of academia as to earn a doctorate should know that one should offer something more substantive than just a vague recollection of something that somebody else said, right? For that reason, a predictable reply along the lines of, don't ask me, ask Kohen Hamandishe, that sort of reply wouldn't be adequate here. An important question to ask is, did the good doctor himself understand the claim that he was making or repeating, right? And if he didn't understand it, why would he pass it on? However, if he did understand the claim that he was repeating, could he clarify what this percentage was of, right? There's a certain percentage of what? Could he point to some relevant study? And once we figure out whatever this percentage was of, can we ask what the good doctor's percentage of that thing might be? But I digress. Moving away from that, I'd now like to switch over to another clip from the same show, which came up just before the 2-hour, 30-minute mark. And this will be the last clip of that I'll discuss in this brief video. Now, in this portion, Benayah Israel discusses the paternal lineages amongst African Americans and Ashkenazi Jews, rightly noting that there is a bit more consistency or a bit less diversity amongst African American paternal lines than there is amongst Ashkenazi paternal lines. Benayah's point is somewhat of a fair one, at least in a vacuum, but it becomes ironic when Kelly immediately transitions to invoking the Lemba. I'll attempt to explain why after the clip. Now, here's the clip. It'll run for a little over 2 minutes.
Like according to the scriptures, we all, have a shared forefather in Jacob, right? We all have a shared forefather in Isaac, right? So we all should have a shared ancestry that shows up in our blood that goes back to one person. Hallelujah, right? So that's the strange thing about us so-called African Americans, us so-called Negroes scattered around the world. When they tested our blood, most of us, we can see, in our DNA, we go back to a shared ancestry that is relatively recent. It's not like, way, 10,000, 40,000 years ago. It's a relatively recent ancestor that we share, that we all share. So that's a check box for us. That's checked off, right? We have a shared ancestor, just like the Bible says. But on the other side of the fence for, like the Ashkenazi, and this is one of the things that my brother Ron Dalton had brought out, and that is they don't have that shared forefather. Like they're all across the board. And I think he even went as far as making like a pie chart and showing like all the different forefathers that this one group is plugged into, and it's not, there's no continuity, right? And so just little stuff like that, fam. I know when I first came into the walk, when I started seeing stuff like that and seeing how they didn't line up with the word of the Most High, I was like, nah, we got to look someplace else for the people of the book.
Absolutely. You hit it right on the nail. And as we shared even tonight, it supports everything that Benayah just shared. The things that he pointed out that Ron Dalton highlighted, and we got the proof. Even with the sources that we're sharing, makes it clear who's connected and who's not. And I believe that, to your point, cuz, is that we here in the Americas, we're kind of like the connector, because guess what? We got Lemba.
Now, Benayah is correct that there is a haplogroup which has a majority amongst African Americans, that being E1B1A. Perhaps between 60 and 70% of African Americans have that haplogroup. Benayah was also correct in alluding to the fact that the Ashkenazi population being in somewhat of a different situation. As I myself have touched on in a previous video, Ashkenazi paternal lines are so diverse that no single haplogroup has a majority among them, right? But then it gets awkward when Dr. Richardson immediately follows that with another attempt to connect with the Lemba. And just, interestingly enough, it wasn't only Dr. Kelly that did that. Just 10 minutes earlier, Benayah himself tried to invoke a connection between African Americans and the Lemba.
When they compare your DNA to these modern day groups, the group that most of so-called African Americans match to, the closest, are the Lemba.
Now, here's why that's awkward, right? The Lemba show a similar diversity within their paternal lines. Similar to Ashkenazim, it seems that the Lemba might not have a majority haplogroup. So on your screen is Himla Soodyall's 2013 article for the South African Medical Journal titled Lemba Origins Revisited. And I'm going to scroll down to a chart marked Figure 1 on the third page of the article, or more specifically page 1011, as far as it appeared in the aforementioned journal. Now, this table compares the haplogroups, or lists the haplogroups found amongst the Lemba, as well as the surrounding Bantu population, as well as mainstream Jews. But we'll be focusing on these two columns here, which are for the Lemba and the Remba, with the Remba being the Zimbabwean counterparts to the South African Lemba. Now, first note that less than a quarter of Lemba and Remba have subclades of E1B1A, right? And when that's noted, I would ask that we be fair here. If, emphasis on if, this is a hypothetical here, but if you want to propose that the biblical Jacob had an E haplogroup, that would lead to the conclusion that both the majority of Ashkenazim and the majority of Lemba and Remba do not descend paternally from Jacob. But that aside, the largest paternal subgroup amongst the Lemba and Remba are the J carriers. If we ignore, for hypothetically speaking, or at least for the time being, if we ignore the distinction between haplogroup J1 and haplogroup J2, then the J carriers seem to actually have a slight majority among the Remba, at least, right? The J carriers among the Lemba and the Remba are also the ones who get a lot of the mainstream attention, right? Now, if, and again, emphasis on if one wants to argue that the J-carrying Lemba descend paternally from the biblical Jacob, that would lead to the conclusion, conversely, different from our previous conclusion, that would lead to the conclusion that the overwhelming majority of the African diaspora in the Americas, the West African diaspora in the Americas, does not descend paternally from Jacob, right? You understand? The position that you take on African-American DNA, Lemba DNA, each of these positions have implications, especially when we're discussing paternal lines. Moreover, if we make a distinction between haplogroup J1 and haplogroup J2, then it seems that, as was just mentioned, no haplogroup has a majority amongst the Lemba and Remba. So recalling Benayah's argument, if patrilineal diversity is a knock against the Ashkenazi population, then a similar level of patrilineal diversity would likewise be a knock against the Lemba population. Would it not? Right? At least if we're being consistent. And so that does beg the question, does Benayah apply that rule or that concern evenly to both the Ashkenazim and the Lemba when it comes to the diversity of their paternal lines? And with that, I'm going to close this short video here, but I wanted to close with a disclaimer. This video did not take the position that any particular person mentioned is not an Israelite. Rather, the point of the video was to note a lack of consistency and clarity in appeals to Lemba DNA. I just wanted to make that clear because there are certain people who try to play a game in which they'll tell you that calls for consistency or clarity are somehow an attack on specifically your lineage or your identity claim, right? This video did not single anyone out as a non-Israelite. Rather, it merely sought to invite people to think more clearly about their positions and perhaps clarify their positions if they'd be so kind, as well as to adopt a consistent approach, a consistent methodology. With that said, as always, I look forward to the comments of others. God bless.